it's me, Jess. Welcome to my channel. I'm here with another channeled message. This is a specific message. It might resonate with you. It might not. All right. So heads up on this one. If this message is coming through for you, like meaning you're the energy that I'm describing in this message, this is about to be highly triggering for your ego. And I feel like it's meant to be, because it's meant to snap you out of a stance of denial so you can see yourself clearly in this situation, take accountability where it's needed and how it's needed, and initiate some kind of healing justice movement in this situation. And I do feel like it would be on this person to initiate that, but also to initiate in the right way. Now, there's another group here where I feel like you could have been drawn into this reading because you're dealing with a person like this. And if that's the case, I feel like this would just be such a sad, like very disheartening, frustrating, exhausting situation. This person could have left you hanging. You could have been waiting for this person to initiate a conversation, to tell you that they are sorry, to explain themselves, to take some kind of accountability. This person could have just not done that at all, or they could have initiated some kind of conversation, but just in the wrong energy. Maybe even, well, okay, so let's get into this message, okay? Because I feel like what this person does is they take a stance of confusion, and they're not actually confused. Now, they take that stance internally. Like, this is a person who will tell themselves, I'm confused, and they'll tell themselves, well, I can't read, you and your body language. I don't know why you're mad at me. I don't know what I did wrong. And therefore, that follows so if you just explain it to me and connect all the dots, like I'm 5, I will make this situation right. But that's inappropriate in this situation. Now, the other thing that I do want to mention is they take this stance externally with others. Okay, so they're telling other people, well, I'm just so confused. I don't know what happened with this person. I don't know why they won't talk to me. I don't know why they don't like me, or this or that or the other thing. And there are a myriad of social benefits to doing that. It's the way that this person maintains their ego identity. It's a way that they save face. It's a way that they stop justice energy. They stop certain conversations. They stop certain probes. They stop people from asking certain questions, because if they're just confused, well, then they don't know. And then anytime they get asked some kind of uncomfortable question, or a question that they feel like might lead down to a place where they might need to take some accountability and own up to something, they can just shut that down early by just saying, I don't know. I'm just flummoxed, here in this situation. This is also a person who hides things that they actually do know. Okay. So with this person, this is a frustrating stance, because this is an intelligent person. And I think that they've proven their intelligence in some kind of way, shape, or form. Like, this is out of character for this person not to be observant, or not to be paying attention, or not to have put certain things together. They have demonstrated some kind of intellect. Now, that might be a social intellect here, but it also could be that this person is in some kind of superior position than the person who was victimized in this situation. So they could be older, they could have more experience, they could have some kind of fancy degree, they could have some kind of job, like a manager job, where part of their job, like a baseline function, is to make decisions and to pay attention and to put these kinds of things together, and to call the flags on the field, like penalty, 10 yards kind of a thing. But they refuse to do that kind of basic thing. So there's some kind of this stance that they are taking is inexcusable for some kind of overt reason. And I think it is because they've demonstrated an intellect. Now, this person comes by this behavior, I think, very honestly, because they grew up in some kind of dysfunctional family. And I think it was Tim Fletcher, who is a psychologist on YouTube. I like to listen to his stuff. I'm pretty sure it was him. It could have been somebody else, but he was describing the dys prefix in front of dysfunctional family. It means to be in pain. So dysfunctional families are families that are in pain, and they don't know how to deal with that pain. And so the way that group kind of forms, and therefore the individuals in it, they develop their own functioning dysfunction in terms of their personality, in terms of their relationship dynamics. They all kind of play different roles. You've got the scapegoat, you've got the golden child, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like this person grew up in a dysfunctional family where this family had pain. They didn't know how to deal with their pain. But I think within this dysfunctional family, the way I want to put it is that there are villains. And I think there was a primary villain, and I think it was one of the parents. So this parent is a villain, okay? There's something about this parent where they're maybe outright just mean. They don't emotionally regulate. They could be an alcoholic. They could be just not a safe person in some way. Now, when you're a child, you are a dependent. You are dependent on that family functioning. You are dependent on those parents. And so it's incredibly painful for a child, but it's also very scary for a child to confront that their existence, their health, their survival depends on someone who is dangerous or unreliable or something like that. So the child starts to develop coping mechanisms, and a strong one is denial. And I feel like that's what this child developed, this strong denial. But their denial has another name, and it's a specific name, and it's confusion. This person puts themselves in a stupor. They put themselves in a state of confusion. Therefore, they do not have to confront the truth, and therefore they do not have to confront the reality. And I also feel like there's something about this person where they might be soft or sweet in their energy, and that is a core tenet of their ego identity and how their ego has formed. I think it's a survival mechanism. I think that's how they got by in this family, is by just being sweet, and it was made known that this person is well-intentioned. And I think in a dysfunctional family, where there are villains, I think in comparison to a villain energy, then yeah, this person is the good one, quote unquote good. But remember how I always tell you being nice and being sweet is not the same thing as being good. Well, this person would be confused about that, but this person benefits greatly by their own confusion. And being nice and being good, getting twisted around in this person's mind is one of the ways that this person benefits. Now, I'm not saying this is like the worst person in the world, but here's how this plays out into adulthood. Because this person is like sweet, and they're used to like having to kowtow to this villain energy, but more than that, their codependent relationship with this, and it is kind of a transactional, almost a covert contract energy where they've proven their loyalty, they've proven their maybe their worth or their utility, that's what it is, to this villain, is that they sane wash everything that this villain does. They put it through this filter of sanity and, oh, well, they really didn't mean it like that. I mean, they can be a little this or a little bit that. In reality, that's a villain. Their behaviors are inappropriate. They should be confronted by that, held accountable, and it should stop. But this is the person that just co-signs everything this villain does as a matter of their own survival. And they learned that when they were a kid. And so as an adult, I think this is a person who is codependent on villain energy. I don't think they like to look at that. So they like kind of strong personalities, or they're drawn to them because this is the same pattern that's playing out. And it's like this person's always the sidekick to somebody like that, like that's like their best friend, or that's like their partner. They're a right asshole that everybody kind of has to deal with. And I think this person, what they benefit from is having that person around for whenever they have to have a tough conversation, whenever a decision needs to be made, whenever they need to be stood up for, instead of this person taking responsibility for learning how to try and do that themselves. And I have a lot of sympathy for this, because I can remember kind of having this moment where I realized this about someone in my family, and where I was so embarrassed by like the way that they spoke to my friend's dad. And I just kind of thought to myself, I have to learn how to stand up for myself and like say the hard things that I feel like I need to say, because if I'm relying on this other person to do it, then I'm going to be misrepresented. And if I unleash that on other people, I'm complicit in that kind of energy. Well, this person has not had that realization yet. And so they benefit because they don't have to be the bad guy, but they'll sick this bad guy on people. They will do that. And then they sane wash everything that this villain energy does. So they kind of feel protected by being around a stronger energy. But this isn't just strength. This is a villain. And so they co-sign everything that this villain does. So in social situations, this person, they are an accomplice. I think that's the role that they play most often, is like the role of the accomplice. And so very negative, evil, villainous energy will crop up around this person. It is not confronted. It is not challenged. It is not told to fuck off. So it just takes root there, and then it just grows. And then genuinely nice people are mistreated. And I feel like they could have had that in their family where there was like a scapegoat energy. I don't know that this person was the scapegoat. I think they avoided being the scapegoat because they just co-signed and sane washed everything that the villain did to like the victim, the scapegoat of the family. You know, they tried to like bridge that gap, but they didn't have any power in that early situation. But actually though, so again, playing out in adulthood though, this person will sometimes play the villain themselves. But here's the thing. This is an intelligent person. And so when they play the villain, they will see how something will unfold. They're very intelligent. They can connect the dots. They can see, okay, I see this and I see that. So, and they could, if they were in healthy energy, prevent a negative consequence from unfolding. But they think that other people either don't see that or won't see it, or they'll think through, like, if somebody does kind of become aware of it, it'll be after the fact, and that they'll see the way in which they can pretend ignorance. They can pretend, oh, and then they can hide behind, well, if I had known that ahead of time, I would have made a different decision. But it's just not the case with this person. They did know ahead of time. That's like when they play the villain, that's how they play the villain. And so they're just used to getting away with this. It's a tall order to get somebody into this situation that can hold this person accountable, that can see what it is that they do and what it is that they're doing. Now, I want to describe this though when they play the accomplice, because I think more often than not, it's a functioning dysfunction, because it allows them to maintain their positioning here as a good person while colluding with very negative energy and propping it up and preventing it from being called out and held accountable. So they hang out with this villain, right? And they're just besties with this villain. And this villain will victimize a victim. Okay. They'll target and victimize this person. They did it on purpose. They are an asshole. This person will sane wash that. And they'll say, oh, they're a really nice person. You know, they just had a case of the blow shits, and, you know, it just affects their mood, you know, would affect anybody's mood. That's not what's going on here with this villain. But this person will say that time and time again. You know what that is called when you do that to a victim? It's called gaslighting is what it's called. It's where you're just ignoring the truth of a situation. But they're doing that because they always want to keep the peace. So this person has this image of their mind of, I'm such a good person, I keep the peace. No, they don't. They keep the status quo. And those are two different things, because this is a fucked up status quo and they're complicit in maintaining this status quo. That's harder to look at themselves that way, because they would have to be accountable and they would have to change their behavior. So plus they have this, like, I'm a good person, because relative to the villain, which they benefit from that too. It's like, well, how bad can I be? I mean, look, this person is the one that you've got a problem with. And I think for some, this person, like I said, they'll sick this villain on people, or they know that they could intervene with this villain. They could see a situation kind of shaping up and they don't stop it. And so for some, I think they do have this weird, like, I don't know if it's quite sadism, but it's like, I thought that you should get yelled at and this person yelled at you and I could have stopped it. Or it's like by proxy, you know, it's like this person, it's like the villain is an extension of this person, kind of, you know, like for some of them, that is the move. So, but I feel like a situation happened here. So this is the way this would play out, is like this villain would victimize someone. And let's say that they actually got held accountable, that the villain did, and the police came and they put the villain in jail. But they really hurt their victim, and their victim got hauled off to the hospital and they're hooked up to like a bunch of tubes and stuff and they've got to recover. This person I'm talking about here, this is the person that would go to the jail and get the villain out first. And they would, sane wash, whatever. They would get that person out. And then they would go to the hospital and visit the victim and want to be called a good person for doing that. And then when the victim wakes up, they would say like, oh my gosh, get well soon. Meanwhile, they could have intervened. And they're part of the reason why the victim is hooked up there. And they will, as the victim comes to turn, like kind of wakes up and maybe they start talking about the situation, again, they're going to sane wash what the villain did. I mean, this is so bad. I understand that you want to stay away from them. They didn't mean it. They feel so ashamed. And what that does is so I've worked a lot with kids, and I'm thinking about this, I don't know, some kind of certification I took, and they described a firefighter level of consciousness with a teacher level of consciousness. And this is the crux of what's wrong with this person. Okay. So they operate from a firefighter level of consciousness. And basically what that is that when there's a fire, this person will rush to put it out. So it's a very reactionary stance. And it is a good thing to do. And there's a lot of benefits. You know, if there is a fire, you got to go, you got to put it out. And so this person, that's how they maintain, I'm a good person. But they're a good person in a reactive kind of stance, because the reality is there's a lot you can do around a community to make sure fires don't start in the first place. Like, I don't know, putting a villain in their fucking place and making sure that they're not like wandering around your community, starting fire. Like, that is a fire waiting to happen, but they don't ever get out in front of it. They wait for the suffering to occur and then they jump in, right? But they still maintain like, well, I'm a good person, because they define themselves by, I go and I put out the fire, you know? And they're actually being called to evolve out of that situation, not revolve around and just keep going around and around and around. And this person's smart enough to know that. This person is smart enough to know what's going on. They just keep themselves from knowing by placing themselves in the state of denial, placing themselves in a state of confusion. And that is the teacher level of consciousness. That is the higher level of consciousness, because when something bad happens and you do have to go put out a fire, it's so important to sit the child down. We all have inner children, right? And to say, oh, and to help them figure out, like, okay, you had this emotion, you were feeling this way, and that triggered you, and then you behaved like this, and that had this effect on this person and this person and this person, and help them debrief that situation and put together how we got to the point of a fire, because there's many, many steps before that where we could have not had a fire if we had just done this differently. So therefore, you do not just put out one fire, you put out all other fires. And that's the next step for this person in their spiritual journey. But they are stagnant because they benefit so much on a social level and in terms of their own self-image from keeping themselves in this like weird little stupor, right? So another thing that I want to mention here about this person is, I think in a certain situation, they were called to referee something, like they were called to make some kind of a call. And that could have been because of a job position that they were in or some kind of social position. They just found themselves there. I can see that this was a highly karmic situation, whatever it was. And they may have been put in this situation without the victim's knowledge even, because they were meant to get out in front of something. This could be like a karmic pay. But I'm seeing this person take this like unreasonable stance where they're on the field and they're there to referee, okay? So at the very least, they need to be paying attention, right? But they're not. So I'm seeing somebody like pitch a ball and then this person's like staring off into space and they're like, what was it? Was it a ball, a strike, a bird, a plane? What was it? And this person is like, oh, what? I don't know. And they expect to be forgiven. They expect for to not be like held accountable and receive some kind of repercussion for that. But it's like, it's stupid. It's literally stupid, because the purpose that you are here on this field is because you're supposed to make the call. So it's, even if other people are not paying attention, because sometimes people don't pay attention, they hide behind this. Well, sometimes they're very socially savvy. This is a slick person. They're real slick, actually. Now, the other thing is, in this referee position, so that's one thing where it's like, oh, well, I wasn't really paying attention. The other thing is, in their position as a referee, it's like, go check the footage. Go review the play. But I feel like this person didn't do that. And we'll talk about why here in just a second. But there's another way that this also could have happened. So in baseball and softball, just in case you don't know, okay, so it's 3 strikes and you're out, right? If you're the batter. And a foul ball is when you make contact with the ball, but it doesn't go in bounds. It doesn't like actually, the ball doesn't go in play. Okay. So when that happens, if that happens in strike 1 or strike 2, it counts as a strike. But if you're on strike 3 and you hit a foul ball, you're not out. It doesn't count as the 3rd strike. You take another pitch. And that can go on till the end of time. You know, every single time you hit a foul ball, you can have 7 foul balls in a row, 10 foul balls, right? In order to have strike 3, you've got to watch a strike go right down the middle, or you've got to swing and miss, right? So I feel like a situation where it's that kind of setup. And I think that they called it incorrectly for one person and also incorrectly for another person. And what I mean by that is, with one batter who was, you know, on their 3rd strike or whatever, they called something a foul ball that was not a foul ball. And in the metaphor, what I mean by that is, okay, well, they made contact with the ball. They're trying. So therefore they should get another chance, you know, but that was wrong. That was a strike. Strike, you're out. That needed to be called. Strike, you're out. But this person didn't do that. And I think there was another person who was on their 3rd strike and they did foul the ball. They did make contact. So in the metaphor, they were trying. They weren't just like dicking off, you know, and like not paying attention and let a strike go down the middle. And they didn't swing and miss. They were actually engaged. They were making some kind of contact. So they deserved another chance. And they called it a strike, and therefore that person didn't get their other chance. And they did that incorrectly for these 2 people. And it reveals some kind of agenda in this person's energy. It reveals that they don't have a neutral stance here. And that would confuse this person. Because I think when you look at these 2 people, they're like, well, I just want to know what the truth is. You know, I just want to what's fair, what's gone on here. Their agenda is actually with themselves. Their agenda is towards extreme passivity. They don't want to get involved. So that's why they called something here a strike for one person, is because like them being out meant that it was just like, it kind of was the path of least resistance, and they didn't have to like assert themselves or get involved in some way, even though that's the position that they were meant to play. And then with this other person where it's like, whoa, strike and you're out. They didn't want to have to take that position. They didn't want to be the villain. But, this is a villain in like just being called the villain, because I actually think it's a very neutral thing that they were asked to do. And we are all called upon to do this for each other in order to maintain our own justice. Sometimes you're called to referee for another soul that's in front of you, and you're meant to do it neutrally. And sometimes you've got to call you got to call it like you see it. And that means taking some kind of stance. It reminds me of the quote that says, if you don't pick a side, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. And I feel like this person like really, really lives that out. And they expect to kind of get away with this because their involvement in the way that things have gone on here that led to extreme injustice and someone being victimized and someone not being okay, they expect that to not be seen by other people or for it to be so buried or so convoluted. And that's all they want in the situation, is to just not be held accountable. That's really what they want. And so when they take these positions of, I was just confused, because they called the balls and the strikes wrong, right? And then they would say, well, I don't know, I was just confused. Even when someone reviews the footage and they're like, you see how this? And they're like, I don't know, well, I was just confused. They were not confused. They just expect to hide behind that stance because it's reasonable that you could assume that someone's confused. This person's not that way. They're just extremely passive and they don't want to stand up for what's right. And it's because they don't want to be labeled the villain. And the reason that they find themselves in situations like this is because they hang out with villains. And so these are like unsafe, emotionally unregulated people who, when you just call it fair, are going to be like, oh, so you are taking that person's side, when in actuality it was a strike and they are out. And you're not taking anyone's side. You're taking the side of, we're all trying to play a game here. And if you don't call it fair, then it's not fun. Like, why are we even playing? But they put it that way, And that's that weird codependent relationship that this person has with villainous energy of like, you're supposed to be on my team. It's giving loyalty. Narcs are like very obsessed with loyalty. They don't care about fairness. They don't care about you doing the right thing. It's like, you're always going to have my side, right? And so somebody here is like, you got to call it for me, right? And so they're like, they just went along with it because it's like the path of least resistance, but it actually wasn't fair and it's actually not right. And then like, despite all of this, like, when all of this comes to a head, I feel like it would take a very intelligent person or somebody here with a strong sense of justice or somebody with a lot of experience to actually just see this person's role in that situation and to just know in some way, shape or form that this wouldn't have happened if they had done something correctly. I think there also could be a situation where maybe this person's a manager and it's like, don't take home the manager paycheck if you're not willing to just call balls and strikes. You know what I'm saying? And it could be that this person is like, whoever got victimized is like doing grunt work for measly pay. And this person's just collecting that check and maintaining their image. That's what it feels like. It's all just image play with this person. And so they benefit quite a bit. They benefit in the sense that when they just cry confusion, it cuts off the conversation and they just expect to be forgiven. It cuts off the probe. It cuts off any accountability energy. And then they just get to sweep it under the rug and be like, see, I'm a nice, pleasant person. But the reality is if you go with this person, justice is not assured. And there's villains around and they never get put in their place and they never get told to fuck off. And that's a benefit to this person. And it's a functioning dysfunction kind of benefit. It's a devil energy benefit in the short-term benefit where this person takes that puff on the cigarette and they're like, whew, I didn't get found out. I didn't get called out. My mask is safe because they're like my mask of being a good person or being a neutral person. Because this is bad energy when they are not being fair. And when they're moving behind the scenes, it's not being fair. And they just don't want to be seen in that energy. And that's also what they like. They like having this villain next to them because that's kind of their scapegoat. Where they're like, no, that's that person. And I'm always having to clean up that person's mess. But I'm just such a good friend or I'm just such a good family member because I have loyalty to this person. And this is somebody who like gets really confused also in their values because their value is to be loyal to a villain. But really their value is just to not rock the boat. And they call it peace. Oh, I'm such a peacekeeper. I'm such a diplomat. In reality, this person is a villain and an accomplice and they are loyal to the status quo and their own passivity. That's who this person is. And the other thing it's an incredibly annoying stance because this is a person who's like, they're sharp enough to put it together and they have like the resources to put it together, but they'll go to the victim and they'll say like, well, why don't you explain it to me? Why don't you, put all this together, connect all these dots that this person was there, they understand what they did. And it provides an opportunity. I feel like you engage with this energy at your own risk because they are a gaslighter. This person is a gaslighter. They do it for a living, I just heard. They do it for a living. And It just, whenever you are trying to connect the dots of like, well, I felt this way or I felt that way, and it's reasonable that you felt that way, and this person knows it, but they're just going to gaslight you, and they're going to say like, well, I didn't know that. And they totally did. Or like, well, I wasn't aware of like this, and they totally were. And so as you're outlining these like 10 different steps in order to paint the picture for this person, there's all of this room for them to just discredit and undermine. This is not a friend. This is not a good energy. But their ego identity is built up around that. But it's only built up around that in relatively speaking. Next to the victim, they look like a good person. And because of their relationship with the victim, they have this weird value of, well, I have this friendship, or I don't want this person to get in trouble, so I have to be loyal to this person and I have to cover for what they did. And it's not the right thing to do. That shouldn't be your value system. And this villain needs held accountable and cut out in no uncertain terms. But this person would have to be a much stronger person to be able to do that. And they are outrunning that karmic lesson at every turn, because they're supposed to learn how to stand up for themselves or say the hard thing so that they don't rely on this villain. This villain is like their crutch here. So this is a gross codependent relationship. And if you've gotten anywhere near it, I feel like you regret it. And it wouldn't make any sense to you, because you would be thinking, this is such a nice person. I don't know why they hang out with that kind of an idiot. And it's because it's codependent and they don't know how to stand up for themselves. And so whenever they require, and they like that this person's like a growling bulldog too. They like it. They like that they're unhinged, because it keeps people on alert around them, because they're associated with this person. This is violence. This person is not what you thought. I just heard they're not what you thought. It's this Tweedledee and Tweedledum combo here. One of them's the sun and one of them's the moon. So one of them expresses externally what this person feels internally. So if you haven't let this person get away with it, I feel like good. And I feel like get away, because there's many villains around this person, because they benefit from it. They quietly benefit from it. But if you ever call this person out, they deny it, because this person's name, their true name, is denial. And I just heard denial is a river in Egypt. So, I get that kind of Egypt connection sometimes here, about something that is like dated back to a lifetime in Egypt, or maybe somebody here is from Egypt or has family there, or something happened in Egypt when you guys were on vacation. I don't know. But they are in denial, for sure, strongly, about not just who they are and why they keep this person around, and the fact that this person in no uncertain terms needs to be stopped and held accountable, and that they could stop it. That the only reason this villain has not been held accountable is because of them. It could not be. If this person removed their support and their proximity, this villain could not function. They would get held accountable. Because I also think this person can be a slick talker. They understand certain things socially, whereas this villain is antisocial. So there would be no explaining what they do. And it seemed like there was one more thing that I was going to say, but yeah, that's the truth. I just heard that's the truth. So that's what I have. I'm sure if this was about you, this is really okay. So if this is about you, the way out of this, because remember I said like you need to be the one to initiate some kind of positive movement here, healing, a conversation, but you need to do it in the right way. And the right way is not, why don't you explain to me why you're upset? I'm just so confused. No, you're going to approach this person and say, hey, I fucked up in this way and that way. You're going to take accountability. You're going to let them know that that villain is no longer in your life, and you do not associate with villains because you've learned how to stand up for yourself. Okay, that's step 1 through 10, because that's not just a single step thing. But you're struggling here. If you're so deep in denial, like where you're like, no, but I really am confused and I do need to ask this person. No, you don't. And here's how you don't. Okay, go through this scenario in your head. Don't change anything from the way that you tell the story here, like to yourself, right? But just look at it through the lens of you are the victim, or I'm sorry, you are the villain. Look at it through the lens of you are the villain. So fill in the blanks here, because you're filling in the blanks a certain way in order to give the story a certain tone. Fill them in a different way that makes you the villain, right? So something where you're like, yeah, I turn my back on this person. and just walked away from them, like in the middle of a conversation. But it was because, I got pulled away and, I was really busy or I was really distracted, and so you tell yourself like, you're not, I don't know, this is just a random example, right? But if you were the villain in this situation, like think about what was going on with this other person that you might not have known. They felt really unsupported, and you went, in your office and that door is locked and they couldn't get the help that they needed. And so because of that, a series of events happened that led to some kind of crisis or some kind of trauma or something here like that. And it all could have been prevented if you see what I'm saying? And I don't know what this is, but it's like, just look at it through the lens of like, you are the villain, and go through that situation, and then go through the same situation that you are the accomplice to the villain. And that you didn't want to see that somebody's villainy, that somebody intended to harm this person, and that you sane washed it. And then after this person was hurt, you gaslit them. And you denied reality. And therefore, in doing so, you assisted the villain by getting them what they wanted, which is cover for their villainous acts and their intentional aggression. And then you got the villain or the victim to be around the villain again, which therefore leads them open to further abuse instead of making sure that they are safe and away from it. You were not a friend to someone who needed a friend. Instead, you assisted an abuser into getting their victim back into proximity. See what I'm saying? You can figure this out on your own. You can process the situation in a way that you can get more answers than just putting it on someone here that's been wronged in this situation and frankly has been through enough. And it's not their responsibility to put, this is a group, you're more than capable. This is a group that is like more than intelligent enough. You just have to care enough to do it. You just have to take accountability. You just have to insist that you not sit and rest in the energy of denial. And that gives you the benefit too, like in a group of people when they're like, why does this person not like you? Or why is this person like not around? You're like, literally, I don't know. It's a more comfortable position for you to be in where you don't feel called out, right? So anyways, that's what I have for you. Again, this is triggering. It's meant to trigger you out of denial because it's like you are in a position where you should be initiating making something right here in the right way. And you're so far away from being able to do that if you're just keeping yourself in some kind of denial. And some of you, like, you're processing this situation, but I think you also have a family situation that you need to process. And like cord cutting and like energy moving and stuff and understanding how this pattern formed, being really compassionate with yourself. But this is a group this is a group that really you cannot let it tip too far into just excusing and sane washing everything here and justifying everything that you've done. It's got to come through the lens of accountability. And that's how you're going to start to not just rebalance karmic situations from your past, but you are being called here actively to stop being in a firefighter position and thinking that that's the pinnacle of goodness or the pinnacle of spirituality. When just because you see a fire, you run over to put it out. This is a group that is expected to perform beyond that. You are not living up to your capabilities. There's other people where like that is the highest level of consciousness that they can achieve. That is not this group. You're expected to be in teacher consciousness where you don't just put out one fire, you put out all other fires. And it has to do with, I just heard divorcing or like getting rid of this villainous energy that is around you. But you got to heal yourself once and for all. All right, that's what I've got. If that resonates, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Bye.